Welcome back to The Healthy Rider, where creativity meets wellness. Today we'll be discussing how to find a therapist and what kind of barriers you might have to jump over to find one that's a good fit for you. There are many reasons why someone might want to find a therapist. Some of these reasons include new or reoccurring mental health crises, relationship challenges, career challenges, addictions, behavioral challenges, boredom or feeling stuck and stagnant, untreated trauma, sexuality, sexual orientation or gender challenges, challenges of racism, gender or identity bias, a desire for greater self-awareness, family or friend challenges, grief of any kind, self-esteem challenges, chronic health conditions, or caretaking challenges. You might find you go to therapy for one thing and then it's actually all about this other thing that you didn't even know was causing this other thing, or maybe you suspect it was causing the other thing, but you didn't know quite how they work together. So I think it's very important to at least try therapy. Most people will find things to talk about within a therapeutic sphere. In the US, especially, insurance or lack of insurance can be a huge barrier to receiving mental health care. That's why it's important to find out what your options are. Search the internet for what programs might be in your state. Sometimes people can qualify for Medicaid if they don't make enough money, and then they can get health insurance through that way. Other times there are cheaper or more affordable institutions that receive funding elsewhere. If you simply think that I can't go to a mental health professional because therapy is too expensive, or I don't have insurance so no one will see me. If you don't even do a little bit of research on Google, you're not going to know. If you do all that research and you find that, yeah, there's no one who's affordable and no one who's affordable for you right now, make a list of therapists who look good for you anyways. If circumstances change later, you can go back to those same therapists. When you look up people's web pages, they often have a range of costs. Talk to the therapist, because it might be that they're willing to charge you far less per session. I know there are some institutions and therapists who actually have like a set number of lower rates they'll give, and that set level of higher rates they'll give to other clients to kind of level out the scale a bit for income inequality. Research and communication. Reach out to the people who have more knowledge than you about insurance or mental health offerings. If you are insured, call your insurance and get a list of places where you can be seen by health professionals. Yes, a lot of places have online things. If you're comfortable with that and you want to do that, you can do that. For me, calling was really beneficial. I got, the name, the location, and the phone number where I could just call these institutions directly. Otherwise, I at least was finding in my insurance's online system that some of the information was outdated. So I'd call a place and they'd be like, oh no, we don't take your insurance anymore. Sorry. And so it was frustrating, and I wanted to make the process of calling for a therapist as least frustrating as possible, because it's already difficult oftentimes to make that leap. Another thing that can be a barrier when you're seeking a therapist can be like the belief that you're not strong enough because you're seeking a therapist. When we recognize we have mental health challenges, but we're not seeking a mental health professional, it's like recognizing that there's ongoing physical pains and not seeing a doctor. And some people, do that or don't do that. They go on having issues. I've definitely been one of them. Actually, I still am. I have to make some appointments next week. And it's just really biting the bullet, as they say, and making the leap. Call your insurance, get a list. I got a list of 10 to 12 places, and I spent, a Tuesday calling different places. Several places didn't answer. I left messages. Several places put me on their wait list, and I think 2 other places called back. One wouldn't have an appointment for months, and then one was able to give me an appointment, I think that very week or the next week. And then, it was as easy as showing up, filling out, the paperwork, and then it began. For a lot of people, if they've gone to therapy and they're like, it's not for me, this isn't working, it might be your therapist, which is why I'm doing this video, because having the right therapist is basically like everything in therapy. If it's not a good fit, you're not going to benefit in the same way. Before you go in to your appointment, I recommend making a list of what kind of attributes you would want in your therapist. Because to a certain degree, therapy is kind of like dating or finding friends. You want someone that has specific qualities that will make the work that you two do successful. I knew I wanted a male therapist. I had all female therapists before. I tried out about 7. I had a therapist who was wonderful when I was a teenager for probably a year and a half, but she ended up changing professions. And then the other therapists were really misses for me. I also had challenging experiences with men at times. I thought maybe there could be something healing in working with a male therapist. I wanted to find someone who didn't make me feel worse about some of the trauma I had experienced. I didn't want someone pitying or who was taken aback by my experiences. I wanted someone who was intelligent, who wouldn't try to guilt me over depression or push me into medication, which was something I wasn't interested in. I wanted someone who was grounded, down to earth, kind, empathetic, someone who could find humor in even humorless situations. I also hoped, as like a bonus attribute, for someone who would understand my creative life, which was and continues to be very important for me. I was lucky that the person who was doing my intake met this criteria. And so we did this hour intake session where he read through the paperwork I had filled out. And at the end of the session, he said, so are you looking for like a specific age range for your therapist, or like what exactly do you want? And I asked him, are you taking any clients? And he looked a little bit surprised, but then we made a session for the next week. And we've been working together for going on 3 years, 2.5 years now. After about a year, we were kind of hitting some roadblocks. He wanted me to do certain things that I just wasn't able to do because I was too traumatized. And he wasn't trauma trained in the specific ways I really needed. Even though we could have these talking sessions where I felt really like understood and seen, afterwards I would leave the sessions and I'd still be walking around with the trauma or traumatic situations as kind of live wires. So it was determined that it would be most beneficial for me to find someone who really was trauma informed with different trauma treatment modalities. I found this note from 2016 I had kept of a therapist I had reached out to, but her sessions at that time, were 100.5, like 175 per session or something like that. So when I reached out to her again, I asked her, which health insurance she took, and she only takes one. And so I was able to sign up for that when the sign up came. One of the things that I think often doesn't get mentioned enough in therapy is that personalities really matter. Even someone who has all the attributes that you would like in a therapist might not be a good fit for you still. Someone can be kind and empathetic and funny and intelligent and still not be a good fit for you. So this happened to me when actually earlier in the sessions with the first therapist, after like 4 or 5 months, I found a therapist who did EMDR, who was covered under the same insurance that enabled me to see this other therapist. And for a few months, she and I tried these EMDR sessions, and they were not working. For me, I felt frustrated because I felt the sessions were going too slow. Some of my frustrations were that I felt like she was treating a client who wasn't actually in front of her. It felt like sometimes she would hear me say something and she would respond as if to someone next to me, like a completely different thing. It was like playing a game of telephone. I like said something to her, and when it came out to her, she heard something else, and so she responded to the something else. Then I would just, feel really frustrated in the middle of these sessions and be like, if the other therapist I have hears me how I feel like I'm speaking, but this one doesn't, then it must not just be me. After like 2 to 3, maybe 4 months, I got so frustrated on a phone call, and I was like, I just don't think this is working, because it was happening again. And she, she didn't take it super happily, but that's okay. You're not gonna please everyone. And it was one of the best decisions I did for myself by ending a session with someone who it wasn't working with. And I do think it was important that I gave her that amount of time to see if we could find some solid ground together. But, I said in the beginning of this video, I'm gonna repeat it, therapy is like dating or like making friendships. If your personalities match, then you're more likely to get further ahead. That's why I say break up with any therapists who aren't serving you in the way you need, but give them a chance, at least in the beginning. Knowing why you're seeking a therapist can inform which therapist you choose and how you structure your sessions with that therapist. It also helps to have a sense of goals in mind for the work you're going to do. And if you have those goals in mind, it can help populate the sessions. So instead of kind of like kicking around things you don't really care about, or just kind of looking around the room and being like, I don't know what to say, you both will have something that the therapist can ask you about or that you can bring up to work toward this goal. So some people have trouble coming up with goals in general, whether or not they're mental health goals or, therapy goals. And the goals could be anything. With the first therapist, I worked on career, writing aspirations, obviously trauma to what degree we could, triggers, relationship challenges, home challenges, on and on. And then with the second one, I had very specific goals related to memory. So I had softening of memories / trauma. I wanted to clear out emotions behind triggers and see what was really happening in those moments I got triggered. And then I wanted to better learn to understand and recognize what emotions I was feeling in which situations, because I would find that I had so many emotions at once sometimes that I couldn't think clearly or even understand what I was feeling. And it was really overwhelming. So I would say that in the last year, I've been able to work with all of those with her and a little bit with the other therapists. And it's been awesome. And I think, sometimes it can sound like a lot when I've told people, yeah, I have 2 therapists. Sometimes I go to therapy 3 times a week. And that's helpful. That's made my life so much easier. And for me, I think about I didn't have a therapist for 10 years, so I'm making up for those years with extra sessions. You just have to find what works for you. One thing I think should be acknowledged when you're finding a therapist, but as well just like once you start sessions, therapy should, in my opinion, be fun. You should be able to laugh and enjoy your sessions with your therapist. You should be able to find things that you enjoy talking about, and, you know, learning new things can be fun. And I think the other thing that helps when your sessions are fun, even as you are talking about these challenging conversations, when you enjoy something, you're going to continue doing it. That's why with the first EMDR therapist, I couldn't really continue with her because it was just such a energy suck when I went to those sessions. But with the first therapist, I was like, well, I don't really, some days I didn't feel like going to therapy, but I'm like, oh, I don't really feel like going today, but we usually have a fine time, or I usually have a fine time, so, I'll probably feel better after, even if I don't want to go right now. Find someone who can offer you that levity. Just because you're talking about the worst situations in your life or some terrible things that happen doesn't mean you can't be reminded of some silver linings, or just find moments of reprieve, which we all need. So I hope this list of how to find a therapist was beneficial. I hope it encourages you if you've kind of been on the fence about therapy. I encourage therapy so much because I don't want to see people suffer in these unnecessary cycles that we can all get stuck in sometimes. So, are you looking for a therapist? Do you have certain barriers that I didn't mention in this video? Let me know in the comments below. There are definitely things I didn't mention, so I would love to hear, more conversation we can talk about. And if anyone's seeking a therapist, one helpful site I like can be Psychology Today. Oftentimes you can search for therapists, and in their description you'll see which insurances they take and all that jazz. I think it's only in the US, so I know that's not going to help the people outside the country. So sorry if some of the insurance stuff I talked about was a little more directed toward US watchers, but wherever you are in the world, I hope you're getting the help you need, and I'm so glad to have you here today. As always, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, and I'll see you all next time. Mwah!